So if you see some rambunction going over here, this is Piper the barn owl. She hasn't been at work for 2 months, so she's kind of excited to be here and being rambunctious and jumping around and hanging on the side of her enclosure. She gets to come out at the end and help, but in the meantime, she might be a little bit distracting. We're going to be talking about vocalizations today, which are a whole lot of fun, and some of us staff and moderators have a whole lot of fun making owl calls. So what we're going to be talking about is some of the basic owl calls that owls make. So we always think of owls hooting, but there's a whole lot of different vocalizations they make. Even the ones that hoot make a whole bunch of different vocalizations, and there's many species that don't hoot. We're going to be focusing on species that can be found mostly in our area, but we're also going to do one other one that's not from the United States. And some of these species have broad ranges, so they might be where you are, they might not be, but they're all sounds that are possible for the human voice to imitate depending on how good you are at different things. And Joe is kind of our specialist at owl vocalizations, so I'm going to kind of go through them a little bit. I will play them to you, and then Joe's going to lead the imitation, and then we're going to unmute everybody so we all can practice making the sound at the same time. Because you're going to remember the sound better if you've tried to make the sound yourself. So the first one we're going to start with, I need to share my audio here. So let me do that first. Hopefully this will work well. I need to pull up, whoops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. There we go. First one we're going to do is the barred owl. And this is why I'm at the Owl Center and not at my house, because I can't easily bring these home. We have mounted specimens of the species that we're going to be talking about. I have to move so you can see this one. So this is a barred owl, B-A-R-R-E-D. And to help with the size, since it looks bigger when it's in front of me, I'm going to put my hand right next to it so you get an idea of just how big it is. It's a medium-large owl for the United States anyway. They have brown eyes and a yellow bill, which helps identify them. And they have vertical bars on the breast and some horizontal right underneath the throat. So that is a barred owl. They live in the eastern part of the United States. They've also spread up into Canada and popped down into the Pacific Northwest, where people really don't like them because they're the big bad cousin of the spotted owl. And these guys actually, are doing a number on spotted owls. And spotted owls are already an endangered species. Well, threatened, technically. But these guys are kind of helping to do them in. But they make really, really, really fun calls. This is probably the owl call that most people know. If they know to imitate any owl call, it's a barred owl. And their main call sounds like, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" Let me play this. Can everybody hear that? Nod if you can hear that. Yes? Okay, so it sounds just like, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And you can tell male from female because the female has a higher voice and a longer all on the end, and the male has a slightly lower voice and a shorter all. So Joe, do you want to lead us in practicing the owl calls?
Sure. So the male, we're going to do that shorter call. We're going to go, ooh, 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 ooh. So we haven't done this before, so we're still kind of figuring out things. But let's unmute people so you can do that. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Everybody? Excellent. Lots of. Do you want to have us do a female?
Yeah, so we're gonna do a female. The female has that longer all at the end, so she goes ooh, 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 ooh. And she has a little bit higher voice. So I'll do it one more time and then we can all do it together. Ooh, 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 oh, oh, oh.
Mama, were you braiding? Is your hair like
Good. Wonderful.
A lot of hooting going on.
Okay.
All right.
It's in the middle of the night. Very good chance it's a barred owl. This, if you just happened to hear it, if you happen to hear caterwauling, you would probably think, are there monkeys or rabid coyotes or something out in the woods? Because it is just crazy sounding. So this is barred owl caterwauling. Joe, do you want to lead us in practicing that one?
Sure. I accidentally, when I muted everybody, I accidentally muted you too. So
okay.
we kind of missed the beginning of your talking about caterwauling.
Okay.
So the caterwauling, you can kind of do whatever you want, but it basically is kind of a so you just kind of go however you feel like it. So let's try that one.
I think I can eat all of it, but I want some. I gave you a piece of the thing. Yeah, no. That's how you.
Great.
Good. I'm glad that everybody's having fun. And now we're going to go into a really fun one. So this is a sound that most people don't hear barred owls make, but if you heard it, you would not say, oh yes, that's an owl. You would probably call the police because you thought there was a woman being murdered in the woods, because that's what it sounds like, a woman's shriek. And it may be an alarm call, it may be used in other contexts, we're not totally sure. Okay, Joe.
I don't know if I want to do that one. I have some pretty thin walls.
I can do that one.
Why don't you do that one?
Yeah, so it's very loud when you do it, and it's something that would scare the bejeebers out of anybody. So it's a, and then just two long at the end. Okay, Joe, you want to unmute everybody?
Here we go, buddy.
It's a long scream. This is fun. You guys are great. This is very fun. Okay, so we're going to do the next species. Next one we're going to do is an eastern screech-owl. And this little guy is quite small. He's only about the size of my hand. They would live in the eastern United States. There is a western screech-owl in the western United States, and they make a different sound than the eastern screech-owl does. This is the same as our JR, the eastern screech-owl. This one's in kind of a concealment posture, so he's kind of skinny and his ear tufts are sticking up because he saw something that's scary. So if you're little, you try and look like a stick if something is scaring you, because you don't have a whole lot of defenses and you get eaten by big things. So he's doing a little concealment posture there. And they have two primary calls that they do. So the first one we're going to do is the one that they're mostly doing this time of year, and that's the trill. And if you watch scary movies, or if you see a movie that has a scary scene in it, very often they put these in the background. And here we go. Joe, you take that one away. You're way better at imitating it than I am.
So if you can roll your tongue, you can do that trill. So we'll try that.
Real apology, not
I can't.
This is
And
doing
Sorry.
Everyone can do the trill. I have to remember to unmute you, Garla.
There's some very good trillers out there. I am not one of them. Sorry for JR. He has to deal with my little ooh. Then in the fall, they will also do a whinny call that sounds, I mean, you wouldn't hear this and say, oh, that's an owl. You would say, who put that little tiny horse up in a tree? It's called their whinny call. That's all there is to it. Joe, you want to lead that one?
So if you can get your voice up high enough, a lot of people have trouble with this one, but if you can get your voice up high enough, it's kind of a so I'll unmute people.
How are your little person doing?
Very good. Kids tend to be better at this than grown-ups.
We have some really good screech owls out there. Okay, we'll just go through those two main calls that they do. There's a whole bunch of other calls that each one of these species do, so we're just picking some of the primary ones and cool ones because screech owls make all kinds of other sounds too. The next one we're going to do is the northern saw-whet owl. This is the smallest one we have in the eastern United States. There's 4 species of owls that are smaller in the western United States. So they're little guys. So here's my hand next to this one. So they're smaller than the eastern screech owl. And they tend to be a little bit more northern. So they breed in the north, but they can migrate down to, oh, even like Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama. Not common, but they can go that far south in the winter. So they're little teeny weeny cutie pie owls. People always say, oh, it's a baby owl, but this is full-grown adults. These are not babies, these are full-grown adults. And the call of a saw-whet owl, again, is not one that you would say, oh yes, that's an owl out in the woods. You would say, who's backing up the truck in the middle of the night out in the woods? Sounds just like a truck backing up. Joe?
So you can either whistle it, or you can just say toot toot, which is funnier. So toot, 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 toot. So let's try that one out.
Good. If you can whistle good, that one can go very well. And sometimes they whistle a little faster and sometimes a little bit slower, but they can do that pretty much all night long. So that's very often a male. He's found a nest cavity and he's calling and saying, hey ladies, I've got a cavity over here, come on over. And if no women show up, he might be there all night long hooting, or tooting, not hooting. It's more of a toot than a hoot. Okay, next one.
We do have a question.
Oh yes.
The question is, can you tell us where these calls are, when these calls are used? Mating, alarm, location?
The majority of these calls that we're going through are territorial and mating. So I don't think there's a very clear distinction between an owl calling to its mate or being at the edge of a territory and calling to the neighbors saying, hey, this is my territory, stay out. They tend to say sound mostly the same. Although I think in the screech owl, if I recall, the whinny is more of a territorial and the trill is more of a call between mates. But most of these are territorial / call with your mate. So they're kind of the primary song, if you will. So the song is what what a bird species uses to attract a mate and for territorial defense. Barred owl whistle shriek is not a territorial thing. That is either alarm or something else that we don't understand very well. Owl vocalizations are not that well understood. And the caterwauling is an excitement thing where they're doing all those crazy sounds. And it might be good excited, like, oh yay, my mate's here, or it might be bad excited, like, whoa, who the heck showed up in my territory? But for the most part, we're doing primary territorial mating things. Any other questions? Okay, we will go on to, I have to move my chair. How's that for an intense look? This is a long-eared owl, and long-eared owls occur in parts of the United States, kind of in a broad range, but they're also in Europe and Asia. And the fun thing about this mounted owl, well, a couple things. It's doing a defense display. So if an owl gets scared, they will fan their wings out and lower their head and try and look really scary to scare away whatever is scaring them. They're usually hissing and clacking their bill at the same time. So this is a defense display of a long-eared owl. They poof up just huge, but actually it's not that big of a bird. They only stand about a foot tall. But the other thing that's funny, this was mounted by a fellow from Norway. And in Europe, they have orange eyes. And in the United States, they have yellow eyes. He brought along his supplies. So we have a North American long-eared owl that has European colored eyes. So not quite perfect. Our long-eared owls in North America are darker in the facial disc. They're paler in Europe. But that's a long-eared owl for you. And their call is about the simplest owl call you can imagine. So if you were just going to make up the sound that an owl made, this is pretty much what they would sound like. It's just a simple whoo, whoo, with a long pause in between. So it's the long-eared owl has long pauses between the whoos. Joe, you want to take that one over?
Yeah, so generally we say it's 4 to 5 seconds between hoots. So it's a pretty easy one to do. You just go, whoo, whoo, whoo. So that's basically it. So I'll unmute people here. Basic.
Good job. Everybody does an excellent long-eared owl. And the funnest story I have, funnest is a word, right? The most fun story that I have about long-eared owls is we do at our International Festival of Owls each year, we do a kids owl calling contest because adults are too chicken to stand up in front of an audience and imitate owl calls. Kids are brave. So we had one boy who was maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe 4. He got up front and he said he was going to imitate a long-eared owl. And I held the microphone up for him. He did, whoo, whoo, whoo. He was counting 4 seconds between each hoot, but he was so young that he had to use his fingers to help, and he couldn't do it with one hand. He had to do it with both hands, and he was right on the button. And I think he got 2nd place that year. So it's a pretty easy one to do and remember. Okay, next we're going to do a great horned owl. Now, people look at this great horned owl and say, what is it doing? This is what a great horned owl looks like when it's hooting. So they lean forward, and here's my hand for reference. These are a pretty large owl. They puff their throat out. This is called their Gular sac that puffs out, and most owls poof out their gular sac when they're vocalizing. That puffs out, they lean forward, and they cock their tail up like an enormous house wren, and that's their hooting posture. That's what they look like when they hoot. This is an exceptionally pale great horned owl. Great horned owls have a broad range across all of the United States and Canada, all the way up to the tree line. And they have different colorations in different parts of their range. So in arid desert areas, they tend to be more tannish. This is the palest subspecies that's found like in Western Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan. So in the coldest parts of Canada is where you would find this one. The ones we typically have are more browns and reds. The ones in the Pacific Northwest are really dark. So there's, for species that have a really broad range, they usually have a lot of color variations for fitting in, blending into their environment. But this is what a hooting great horned owl looks like. Great horned owl calls are my specialty. That's what I study. So this is super fun. What I realized early on was that you can identify individual great horned owls by their voice. So you can identify male and female based on the rhythm of their hoot. But if you get really good and you hear the same bird over and over and over again, so if you have great horned owls in your backyard and you hear them regularly, not only can you tell the male from the female, but sometimes you can tell when, whoa, that's not my pair, that's a different pair, or maybe one of yours died and the other bird took a new mate. You can actually tell that by voice if you get really familiar with what they sound like. So the one I'm gonna play, we call them Rhett because I've had, I don't know, over 20 owls, individuals over the years since we started in 2004 that have come and gone, some captive ones, some wild ones. And this guy's name was Rhett because there was an owl named Scarlet Owl Hera that showed up and was very interested in Rusty and Iris, well, Rusty, I guess, our captive breeding pair that you can watch on our live owl cam. And she harassed them and harassed them and harassed them and harassed them. We named her Scarlet Owl Hera from Gone with the Wind. And eventually, after months and months and months and months, she found another guy off to the west of us. So we named him Rhett, and that's this guy. This is what he sounded like. Standard male great horned owl, kind of a five-noter. Okay, Joe?
All right. Let's try that all together. Very nice.
Very good. Now, if you had a female, she would have more notes and a higher voice. So let's see if I can remember what Scarlet's was. Hoo, 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 hoo. So it was a higher pitched voice, kind of a triplet. Instead of hoo, 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 like a male, it was hoo, 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 hoo. And then she had two notes in the second to the last part. So instead of hoo, hoo, it was hoo, hoo, hoo. So Scarlet was hoo, 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 whereas Rhett was hoo, 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 hoo. So those are kind of some of the basics. Some females have even more notes. Some males have a sexy vibrato, so it's more of a hoo, 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 hoo. And it's more the males that get the vibrato. So let's go on to a begging call, because very often and soon people are going to start hearing begging calls from young great horned owls. And sometimes those get confused with barn owl screams because they're kind of screechy sounding, they're broad spectrum, and they're really annoying because the kids are saying, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, here I am, feed me, feed me. And you know, those of you who have had young kids, they like to eat a lot, right? And so young great horned owls can do that like almost all night long. And when you get to late summer, people will say, oh, I had this annoying screech owl in my yard. Haha, wasn't a screech owl, because screech owls aren't loud and they don't make annoying sounds. They make that nice little whinny and a trill, but young great horned owls screech, and it's over and over and over and over, and it's really annoying. Now, if you were a parent owl and you had a kid that kept doing that over and over and over again, you'd probably shove food in its mouth just to make it shut up. But that's kind of the goal of a begging call, is to give me food, give me food, give me food. Here I am, feed me. Joe.
Yeah, I know this call very well. I worked with a great horned owl who was trained to be a falconry bird, so he was very food motivated, so he would do that all the time. So he went just constantly. So go ahead and try that one.
Kids are really good at that one. They used to say, "What's for supper? Can I have something to eat? Can I have a snack?" Very good at that one. So that's a young great horned owl begging call. And if adults have been trained with food, like in a captive setting, if they've been raised to be an education bird and they've been trained with food, they'll retain that into adulthood. Wild owls can do some similar squawking, but in different contexts. A female at a nest, if the male's not bringing enough food, she might make that to say, "Hey, bring more food," but it's not a regular vocalization that they typically do. Like our captive breeding pair, she never makes that sound because he brings her tons of food all the time. But it's basically about, give me food.
Jenny asks, do baby barred owls screech too?
Yes, baby barred owls screech also. It's more of a, reminds me a little bit more of a tea kettle sound. It's a little more whistly, more of a so it's not quite as screechy as a great horned owl sound. So all young owls make some kind of begging sound, but great horned owls are the one that's most commonly encountered.
Do screech owls ever actually screech?
Good question. I mean, they're called screech owls. They should screech, right? I think whoever named them should be shot because they don't do what I would consider a screech. Some people will say, oh yes, that's a screeching sound, but it's not something I would describe as a screeching sound, and it's not something most people would. And so I would say they don't. There's some people that say, oh yes, this obscure vocalization is a screech, but in my personal opinion, it doesn't sound like a screech. Any other questions? If not, I think we'll go to Marianne in the Netherlands to teach us about eagle owl sounds.
Hey, thank you for me. Am I muted or not? Can you hear me? Ah,
yes.
Hi. Okay, so here I am. And what I do, I'm a moderator, as most of you know, and as Carla just explained. And I also started in 2016 to study vocalizations of Eurasian eagle owls. And those are really big guys. I don't have a fantastic mounted specimen to show you. But I did some math because, well, you all use inches and feet, and I, as European, get always lost in that. But our Eurasian eagle owl here in the Netherlands, so they live throughout huge parts of Europe and also Asia. And the further up north you go, the bigger they are, and also a bit paler, just like the great horned owls, they get paler. But they are 27 inches tall here in my area. So that's a big bird. And when they fly over your head, their wingspan, it doesn't even fit in the screen. The wingspan is 5'6".
Wow.
I'm about 5'6", so that's huge. So these guys, they don't have really complicated songs, which I always find fascinating. The male, well, I'll let you know. I'll let you hear the male, but I'm just found out how to share screen. Let me see. Was this share?
Yes.
Okay. And what I am going to let you hear now, where's my program, is a male Eurasian eagle owl? Well, actually, Carla found out, like she just said, that great horned owls, you can recognize them by their individual voice. So the same goes for Eurasian eagle owl males. So what I did is I put two males in one sound file, and I will let you hear both males. So the first three are the first male, and the second three hoots are the second male. So you can hear the difference too. And in between, you have these few seconds of a break. You can already secretly practice. I won't hear it. Let's go. So maybe we can practice this one together. It's not that complicated, is it?
Just a ooh.
Ooh, or ooh. Awesome. So the female does a bit of a similar sound, but she sounds a bit more whiny. And when I tell that to male visitors, people, human visitors, they always say, yeah, it's the female, because they're more like, ooh. So you hear the male, ooh, ooh. And I have a sound file of that as well. But where is it? Oh dear. Ah, there they are. Here we go. So that was two different females also. Can you do the whiny ooh? Wow. Fantastic. So the second male and the second female you heard, I call them Bonnie and Clyde. I named them this way because they stole my microphone about 2 years ago. I had my microphone standing in the territory, and at night they decided that the fluffy windshield was perfect to eat. So they stole it, grabbed it, took it up into a tree, and then decided it wasn't edible and dropped it. So they are Bonnie and Clyde for me. But Bonnie and Clyde also have owlets, and they had 4 last year, and they have 4 again this year. So I call those the Daltons. I mean, you have to say something. And begging owlets sound like this. So that was just 2 of the 4, but can you imagine sleeping there? And there are actually people living there like 50 yards away from this, and there are 4 of these screeching all night. Maybe it's best for your vocal cords not to try it, unless you want to. Anyone wants to? Carla?
Screeching.
I don't know if I can do it.
I can't do it. It's like... I hear some really good ones. Wow.
I think the kids are good at it.
That's what I was thinking too. So I still have one. Do you still want to hear something? There's one left, because you know I said the eagle owl male does ooh, and the female does ooh. But when they get excited about a nest, then the male all of a sudden does ooh. It goes all like ooh. And she still does the ooh. Let me see where that one was. I just had it. Oh, here you have it. This is the male offering the nest to the female, saying, look what a wonderful place. And this goes on for hours. So it's
Thank you, Marianne.
just fun. You're welcome.
Fantastic. So those are the calls that we wanted to go through. And Piper has ants in her pants to get out, but I'm going to share her call once I take her out. But before I take her out, I'm going to have Joe run through just a few things about our website. Some of you this will be a review for. Some it'll be a little bit new, just so you know what you can find on our website, because there's a lot of stuff hidden in there. Joe, are you handy somewhere?
I am.
Okay.
There we go. Can you see my screen? All right, so this is our website. It's internationalowlcenter.org. Over on the sidebar are where most of the important things are. You can learn about the programs and events that are going on. We plan to build a permanent facility in the future. Right now we're just renting the building that the owls are in. We do research. From there you can find our live cam, learn about Rusty and Iris, and talk with our moderators and chatters. That's pretty cool. DIY activities. If you're bored inside, you can do all kinds of activities here. If you found an injured owl or a baby owl on the ground that you're not quite sure whether it needs help or not, you can go to these links. You can learn different things you can do to help owls under Owls and You. So you can do live an owl-friendly life. That's like keeping your cats inside, using mouse traps instead of poison, things like that. Why it's not a great idea to keep an owl as a pet. If you want to learn about the facility, can't visit right now, but later on you can see what we look like, what the building looks like, and things like that. If you want to help us out, if you enjoy the programs that we're doing, you can become a member, you can donate, you can help us feed our owls. It costs like $500 a month to feed all of our birds, so you can help that way there. If you want to help teach people about owls, that's under educator resources. We are working on an owl conference next year. Hopefully that still is on. And then down at the bottom we have our store. So if you want to buy all kinds of owl merch, we've got puzzles and playing cards and shirts and hats. And we just got in some really cool sets of greeting cards with art from our kids' art contest. So definitely check out our store as well. That's the super quick version of our tour, because it shouldn't take too long to get Piper out. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. We'll see if Carla is quite ready. Looks like she's still working on things. So are there any questions that I can answer while we're waiting? If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat. Or not. Maybe we've taught you everything you need to know about owls. Do owls make sounds mostly during breeding season? Most of the time, yeah. In the winter, we do owl prowls. We take people out at night and try to get wild owls to respond to us. We typically only do that in the winter because that's when they're going to be vocalizing the most. This time of year, we don't do owl prowls because they've got babies and they just don't want to be bothered. They do make sounds during the rest of the year, but the majority of it is during breeding season. Are Are we getting many entries for the owl beating contest? Yes, actually, we are into the 30s at this point. We are doing a beating owl beating contest, which is closed at this point, but we have gotten quite a few entries here. Oh, do the color of owls' eyes correlate with them being diurnal or nocturnal? That is something that a lot of people come up with. I'm not quite sure where that originated. I've heard, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I've heard that diurnal owls have yellow eyes, nocturnal owls have dark eyes, and crepuscular owls have orange eyes, or something like that. Maybe it works in the place that this first was suggested, but it doesn't work for everybody. So as far as I know, the color of their eyes just determines what color their eyes are. Let's see. Yep, Piper is 5 years old. There's Piper, speaking of which, so we'll go back to Carla.
Okay, so let me find my video here. There I am. I have to see what I'm doing. Oh, that's why. Technology. There we go. Yeah, sorry that took a while. Somebody's being extremely rambunctious, as you can see, and she removed the Jess, the leather on her ankle. Well, that's the anklet and the Jess strap, both. And I didn't want to take her out with just one on, because then that puts a lot of pressure on one leg if she tries to fly. And because she's being very rambunctious, she was probably going to do that. And she didn't particularly want me to put that other Jess back on. Can you sit still? She thinks she should be able to fly wherever she wants here. So this is Piper, the American barn owl. And let me play what her call sounds like. You would think this beautiful bird would have beautiful vocalizations. They don't. It's hideous, like jerk you out of the sleep in the middle of the night, shriek, kind of freak you out sound, especially when they do it very close to you. So this is not quite super loud, but it's not pretty. Hang on, I have to share my audio. Let me play that once more so that you can hear it better. That's what you sound like, Piper. Those are wild barn owls that we recorded actually here in Houston, which is a big deal because we're at the extreme northern end of their range. They're rare enough in Minnesota, sit still there, that they are not even listed as a rare or endangered species. They're considered at the edge of their range. Stay put. So we've been doing some studies on them, trying to find them vocally because they're very nocturnal. They're not often seen. So although they've been in the area, nobody's encountering them unless they're finding them dead or dying because they're hunting during the day. So we just got a grant a month or two ago for some passive acoustic monitoring. So it's small boxes that we can put up in different locations that will record to an SD card. And then once every week or two, I pull the SD cards and analyze it using software to pull out any barn owl calls. This rambunction here. She just has new Jesses, so they're nice and soft on her ankles. We have to change these every now and then because the leather, it's kangaroo leather because it's soft, light, and very strong. But it does dry out over time, especially when they're in their bath and out and it gets wet and dry and wet and dry. So she's got new ones, so it should be soft on her legs, but it's not nice for her to be baiting against them like that. So we call it baiting when they're trying to fly, but they're tethered. She just has a lot of ambition right now. Do we have questions about Piper or other things right now?
There are a few.
Okay.
The one that's most being talked about right now is when is our next meeting and what's it going to be about?
Next week, we're going to be talking about eggs and incubation and other things that have to do with eggs. There we go.
Let's see. I caretake a male barn owl. He makes a car alarm call, continuous only when calling a mate. Haven't found it anywhere else.
Is it a European barn owl or an American barn owl? Because they have different vocalizations. We'll find out sooner or later.
Someone asked, how large is a barred owl territory?
Barred owl. Well, good question. Depends on how good it is, first of all. So if there's a lot of food, it's going to be smaller than if there's not a lot of food, because they need, that's the main thing. A barred owl territory, sorry, you can't sit on the computer. Barred owl territory is a lot smaller, or smaller than a spotted owl territory, because a spotted owl is a very fussy food eater, so they have to have a big territory to have enough of the foods that they like to eat. I mean, it's probably less than a square mile, but probably not a whole lot. It's going to vary. I mean, generally it's a larger owl, so it'll have a decent size territory, but I can't give you specifically. I'm not sure.
They say it was an American barn owl.
Okay. Oh, I see who it is. Send me, if you can record that and send me one of those, I'd love to hear that, a recording of what it sounds like.
Which of our owls is the oldest and the youngest?
The oldest is Alice, the great horned owl. Sit still, young lady. Alice is 23 and retired. She's got arthritis now in her bad elbow and in her knees. Next one is Uhu, the Eurasian Eagle Owl, is 8. Ruby's 6. Piper's 4. And JR is 2. And actually, I'm trying to think, his birthday was like just within a few days. I think it was, may have even been just 2 days ago. I wasn't paying attention.
Happy birthday. Do U.S. long-eared owls have orange eyes?
No, American long-eared owls have yellow eyes. Sit still, Miss Rambunction. So she's letting me do this because she's a human imprint and she thinks I'm her mate. And mates will, of barn owls, will preen each other around the head. So I'm only doing this to try and chill her out and make her settle down because she's being rambunctious. I have to put you back in your aviary there, dear.
I think I read or heard that Piper is bonded to you. Can barn owls bond to more than one person? Remind us of her lifespan. Does a bonded owl survive if its owner passes first?
So she's imprinted on humans, which is general to the species, but she thinks I'm her mate, so that's a one-person thing. What were the other questions? Her lifespan, meaning captivity in the wild, you know, we're talking 1 or 2 years on average for a barn owl. You may have to go back in your enclosure there, dear. In captivity, I know they can get into their teens. I think the longest I heard was like 19 or something for an American. Now, European ones, I think there was one in the wild that lived to be 30 something. So that's crazy. And does a bonded owl survive if its owner passes first? I can't say for sure, but they do seem to be more emotional than other owls. I'm going to put her back in her enclosure here because she's being really rambunctious. I'll be right back. This will only take a second. Okay, in you go. You're being too rambunctious here. Oh, yeah. Okay, that was easy. Other questions?
I see. Does their longevity correspond to their size?
To some degree. So usually the bigger owls live longer than smaller owls, although I know of a rehabber that had a pygmy owl, which is even smaller. It's not that big. It's, you know, they're like that big. In captivity that lived to be 18 or 19 or something. But I think usually it corresponds to size. Other questions?
I see, are beak clacks intended to communicate a threat?
Yeah, the bill clacking where they rapidly snap that together, that's like a back off, leave me alone, go away, get out of my face kind of a call. And well, it's not really a call because it's non-vocal. And I think most, if not all, owls do that. What else do we have for questions?
I see, does a spotted eagle owl take one mate for life or not?
I can't say for sure, but it's a bubo and it's non-migratory. So I would expect they typically are going to take a single mate until they lose that mate and then probably take another one. As a general rule, not hard and fast, but that's what I would expect with a non-migratory owl species that's resident on territory year-round.
What's the most interesting thing you've learned in your owl vocalization research?
Oh, the most interesting thing in owl vocalization research was that babies can make adult vocalizations in their little itty bitty pee-pee sounds. So great horned owls starting at just shy of 2 weeks old can do little and their little head goes forward and they don't even have tail feathers, but their little tail stump goes up. It is so cute. So that by far was the most interesting thing that I found.
I see, do owls get hunted?
So if you mean by other owls, larger owls eat smaller owls. So yes. So Piper as a barn owl would be eaten by great horned owls. It's a significant predator for them. She's oblivious to that fact. Screech owls get eaten by anything that's bigger than them. But in some places, humans do actually kill them also. So I know Raju Akarya in Nepal has said that in some rural areas of Nepal, they are hunted for meat. So that's on purpose. And then, you know, sometimes they're killed for superstitious reasons, like, oh my gosh, if an owl calls, somebody in my family is going to die. So if I see an owl, I'm going to proactively kill it. So there's some of those things going on.
It is illegal to kill them in the US.
Yes, it is illegal to kill them in the US. Hold on, somebody's almost at it. What are you doing? Wow. How did you do that? Glad I looked over there. She almost got herself out of her enclosure. Somebody's rambunctious. What can I say?
Let's see, are eagle owls considered the largest owl species?
Oh, it depends on who you ask. So the largest individual owl ever measured was a Eurasian eagle owl. So the northern subspecies, the Siberian one, is huge, much bigger than our uhu, and the ones that Marianne has in the Netherlands. So the largest individual measured was that, but eagle owls, again, have a large range. So some are much larger than other ones. I mean, they're all big, but some are a lot bigger than other ones. But we kind of consider the Blackiston's fish owl to be the biggest because all of them are huge. I mean, there's not many, it's a very rare species, but they're all huge. They don't have any smaller subspecies. So, and it very much rivals the largest Eurasian eagle owl. So we kind of consider them to be the largest. Some people will say great gray owls are the largest because they're very tall. Can't see that, but because they're just poof. It's like really big hair, super long tail, but they don't weigh very much. But some people will say, oh, that's the largest owl. So it depends on who you ask.
Is the female great horned owl call higher than the male?
Yes. So if you read some older books, it's going to say that the female has a lower voice than the male because she's larger. So that's kind of what you would expect. A larger species would have, or a larger individual would have a lower voice. I'm watching our little terror over there. But the female actually has a smaller syrinx. We have a larynx, they have a syrinx that makes their their calls, and the female has a smaller one. So female great horned owls, I think most owl species, not all, females have a higher pitched voice.
Do owls foretell weather changes? If so, how do we know this? Is it researched?
I have no idea. I have read nothing on the subject, so not a clue.
What does a great gray owl sound like?
Oh, very low voice, and it is kind of low, muffled, and kind of distant, kind of a woo, 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 woo.
Do different owls' diets vary much?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Even individuals. So within great horns, you'll get some that specialize more on birds, some that are more mammal eaters, depending on where they are. Some may focus more on reptiles or bats. But between species, totally different. You can get some that are insect eaters, some that are fish eaters, some that are mammal eaters, some that are bird eaters. So yes, to both.
I didn't see any more questions. Oh, there's one. What is the preferred diet of an eastern screech owl?
Eastern screech owls have one of the most varied diets in the United States. So anything that's small enough. So that's insects, that can be lizards, it can be small snakes, small mammals, birds, bats. They eat kind of anything. So that's why they have such a broad range and can survive in urban areas as well as rural areas, because as long as they've got a place to nest, they can find something to eat. So a really broad diet.
Do all owls give off pellets?
Yes, all owls throw out pellets, and other species of birds throw out pellets also. But the thing about owl pellets is they're the ones that have bones in them. So hawks and eagles throw up pellets, kingfishers can throw up pellets, robins, thrushes, all kinds of other birds can throw up pellets also, but we always think of owls because they're easier to study because they have bones in them.
And we are at 11 o'clock.
Okay, so I will think we will, whoops, I see a question just came in. How has the environment affected owls? It depends on what we do. Some owls do better with human development, like screech owls can adapt, great horned owls can adapt, and some do worse. I mean, like spotted owls are doing terrible because we planted trees, so barred owls could move to the northwest, and now they're out competing the spotted owls. So what we're doing to the environment is beneficial to some, not beneficial to others. I think Fred Gelbach, who studied screech owls for 50 years in Texas, found that over time, as the temperature was getting warmer and warmer, screech owls were nesting sooner and sooner. And that's probably happening for other species also.
I also see, is it true that they can die if they don't bring out the pellets?
Probably because their stomach can't digest the fur and the bones, and it would just get full and they couldn't get anything else in there. So they have to get them out. But also if they're fed a diet that doesn't include casting material, bones, and the indigestible stuff, my understanding is they will eventually die at some point. Okay, I think we will wrap this up, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of you next week to talk about eggs. So thanks for coming. See you next week.
So thank you all for joining us. If you like the program, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, and consider becoming a member. Check out the links in the description below. Be safe, and thanks for making the world a better place for owls.